So 45 years ago, my father, who was an electrical contractor, threw me out on a job site. I was back in the days when you could work on a job site at 14, and quick do the math and you can count my age. But anyway, um, so it's a family business really, and started doing electrical work, got master's licenses from a couple of states early on, really the first one at 19. So the that side of the business as an electrical contractor goes back decades. My brother and I in the 90s launched into a low voltage component of the business, and we actually were one of the largest fire alarm integrators in the Southeast. We sold that business in the early 20s, 2003 timeframe. And then I was under non-compete, so I actually went into telecom. And then in 2012, my wife, who is the boss, bought the company from my mother, who was the boss. And that's how we wound up here. So I worked for my father and for my mother, and now I work for my wife. It's a happy family.
Yeah, right. A great family unit. And kind of carrying you through, I guess, just different phases of technology. And then, I mean, into the, like you said, starting as an electrical contractor and then bringing you into what we do today with Symphony.
Right. And as anybody who's worked in this discipline would tell you, the technology continues to advance at a more and more furious pace. And at one point in time, all the technology that went in a building was done by the electrical contractor, and that's almost never the case now. So that's probably one good clear indication about things have changed. So at some point, if you were in that industry, you had to diverge and decide which way you were going to go.
Wow. So I mean, at that time when initially an electrical contractor would do all that technological install, and then now you said it's kind of that's rare, or they don't do that anymore. So it's shifted where it's multiple companies can do that, or I guess it's just the advent of technology. So why did that shift happen? And I guess how does Symphony play a role in that today?
So I'd say that shift is probably still happening. So you do, in some cases, do still see that work being underneath the electrician, but it's shifting more and more to where um, owners or general contractors are creating a technology package because they're recognizing the complexity that's involved, the convergence that's occurring. So in a different world, a contractor might have hired three, four, five, little companies to do bits and pieces of the technology, and they were all standalone and independent. Well, that's increasingly less the case. So more and more technologies are relying upon a network backplane, if you will, and you're attaching more and more different technologies, devices to that network backplane. The management of that network becomes more complex, and then all of the integration. Now, somebody on the back end, of course, there's a lot of complexity, how to make it all work and tie together. But what we're seeing here in the past 5 years is the convergence on the front end. So where the user is experiencing the ability to, say, from a cell phone with even a common single credential, be able to operate multiple different systems that tie to the same database, for example. So in multifamily, 10 years ago, you might have 5 or 6 different databases. So you had the rent roll database, but you also had the access control database, and you had all these different databases for putting people in and out, and so collapsing that into one database, which is very complex on the back end, so that on the front end, the customer can simply go into one platform and have one common credential, and then the people managing that, the leasing agents, don't have to try to manage multiple databases. So it's increasing complexity on the back end to create this simplification of additional technology in the front end. And so you really have such it's gone from being mostly about installing stuff to the software and the integration that drives that convergence.
Yeah. So what role does Symphony play in all of that?
Yeah, so that name Symphony that you happen to just mention in your question is really critical to that. I am terrible at marketing. Thank God you're here. So, and that includes things like branding. So I have a good friend who's done branding for some Fortune 500 companies, and just for the cost of a flight to Atlanta, he spent 3 or 4 days with us branding. And as we talked about our vision for taking multiple technologies, having them work in concert together, relieving the customer of that often overpromised, underdelivered technology experience. And at some point, I didn't use the word concert when we were talking, but at some point he said, I feel like I'm hearing this symphony of technology, where you've got multiple different instruments, and the tuba is nothing like the violin, but somebody's got to make them all work together. And the objective is not to have a bunch of instruments playing on stage. The objective is to have a pleasing musical experience. And we're like, that's it. That's exactly what we want to communicate to customers. We want technology not to underperform, but to actually solve the real business issues that they have. And so we like to use the music metaphor to communicate that we understand that technology is a servant to the business. So any technology solution always has to solve a business problem. And when it doesn't, when you see people enamored of technology for technology's sake, that's when it becomes a rabbit hole.
So how do you go about then, I guess, kind of educating someone on that, seeing technology for technology's sake versus what Symphony does, having technology be in support of the business as a whole?
Yeah, so it's challenging because there's certainly environments where people have a perspective that we know what we want, so just price it. And then, it's just a price issue. Our approach really is we don't play well in that field. We really play better in the field where the customer's like, look, I can't keep up with all this stuff, and I really need you to give me 2 or 3 different recommendations, pros and cons of each. And frankly, the more open kimono you can be about the cost and where you make money, the better. And so that's our approach. Is very often, like with customers, we are completely open book in our pricing. We'll just show them, here's what our costs are. You want this versus that? Okay, so this is the cost difference, and this is our labor costs and our markup. And we try to make a reasonable amount of money, but I get embarrassed if we make too much money. And so I really don't want. I want the customer to be able to look at any time and say, okay, you're a partner. You care about what my business, how my business performs. And in some cases, we've actually even, because the customer really asked us to, given up the integrator role and are actually serving more in an advocacy role for the customer because of how many problems they've been having. And we're going like, okay, it's not really what we prefer to do. We like to do the integration, but you're having so many issues that we just want to help. And I think you boil it down to it. When we hire people, I tell all of our staff, got to find out if they care. It has to be the most important thing. Does this person care? Because if they don't, they got to go. Because we have to care individually, because that's the thing I most want to communicate to customers. I really care about your problem. And if I can come up with a solution that doesn't cost very much or doesn't even make me any money, but it's a good solution for you, I'm happy about that. And I wouldn't say there's a huge number of situations, but there have been any number of situations where we've actually talked ourselves out of business because the customer had a fixed idea in mind of a technology solution they needed. And we're like, honestly, with just a little bit of optimizing of what you've got, you can solve your problems. And that to us is a win.
Right. So, this notion of obviously caring immensely and having that passion for people and wanting to truly help businesses, that, clearly ties into our overall mission and our core values. So can you speak to that a little bit, Eric, of how that idea of caring and really truly caring both with the members of the Symphony team as well as those we work with, how that plays a role in what we do?
Yeah, well, talk is cheap. And so a lot of people can say that they care. And I get that. Some people do it for, I think, just for appearance's sake. I've been in any number of organizations where we've developed a core set of values, and from my perspective, it needs to be one thing that's very clear that you can latch on to. And so we labored for quite some time and finally came up with the word honor as the sum up of everything that we value. So we figure if we act with honor, so the noun, and then if we honor people, the verb, we pretty much will get it right every time. And that, we elaborate on that. We talk about taking accountability and never shirking a problem. And we talk about treating others as better than ourselves and, all those kind of more specific articulations of that. But at the end of the day, I would rather make a whole lot less money and have a whole lot more satisfied customers than vice versa. It would grieve me deeply to think we were highly profitable and we're leaving customers with, substandard or overpaid solutions. But if you talk to the folks who work here, especially the ones that worked in large impersonal organizations, they'll tell you it's for real. And to Johnny, my wife, who's the boss and who is the walking embodiment of those values, and of course to me, because after 31 years, I've been whipped into shape. It matters the most for us. It matters more than anything else that we do.
Yep. And I mean, it really is such a unique piece of Symphony, being driven truly by those core values, by that honor piece. And then having, you're right, talk is cheap. I mean, it's one thing to say it, but then to see everybody every day actually living those out, living that piece out of our mission statement, and knowing that that is what binds this team together.
Well, I'll give a quick anecdote. I think I've told you this before, but I heard someone shouting a few months ago in the office. I was stunned. I haven't heard anybody yell at anybody around here in forever, and I thought I need to go find out what's going on right now. I went around the corner. Someone was telling a joke, and part of the joke was someone yelling at someone, and I was just so relieved, that actually we didn't have somebody yelling at somebody. I mean, you'll never hear anybody denigrate or insult or treat you as less because you're just a vendor or just a contractor or whatever. And so it was really gratifying for me to know that people didn't think it was okay to yell at someone because you're upset, because it's just not.